So it's time for this week's difficult conversation. And as we know, today marks World Holocaust Day, a time to remember the millions of people who died during the Holocaust under Nazi persecution. As this is actually the first memorial since the horrific attack on the 7th of October, the commemoration this year is more poignant and relevant than ever before. I'll be speaking to you about these experiences and the importance of remembering the millions of people murdered in the Holocaust. So joining me now is author, singer and TV personality Oli London. Oli, thank you very much for joining me. It's really good to speak to you. So listen, Oli, a lot of people might think, well, how are you sort of associated with this? Hopefully we'll get Rabbi Jonathan Romain on as well. We can't get hold of it at the moment, but I'm so grateful for you to come in, because I've seen you do lots of things, lots of events to support the people of Israel and also the Jewish community. So talk to me about the sort of things you've been doing and why this time of year and also this particular day is important.
Well, I've always looked through history. I've always looked at the period between the 1930s, from watching documentaries and books, and you've seen the build-up of this anti-Semitism. And what we're witnessing now is akin to that. It's akin to, the Star of David being drawn on buildings. We've seen that in Berlin recently, even in Beverly Hills. And there's a lot of fear-mongering against Jewish people. There's a lot of targeted attacks and targeted hate. And a lot of Jewish people feel scared now, just like they did in the 1930s. And today is extremely important because obviously we mark the Holocaust and the horrors that happened in history. And we saw, a massacre on October 7th that claimed over 1,200 lives. And there are still over 130 hostages in Israel. And we've seen, so many protests around the world. And, while we can say there are bad things that happen on both sides, we've seen a lot of anti-Semitism rising, and some Jewish people even feel that they're safer in Israel. So I was really horrified by what happened, and I've been campaigning for that. I visited Israel, Kibbutz Kfar one of the sites of the massacres, in December. Also been helping with various organisations to bring some of the young adult survivors to the United Kingdom, and also took part in a gala the other night, the British Friends for the Art Museums of Israel Society, which raised several £100,000, basically helping to rebuild an art gallery in Kibbutz Be'eri that was destroyed on October 7th.
It's so distressing, isn't it, if you think about it. Now, we spoke to Uri Geller earlier, and Uri said that now he was receiving messages on their phone. So they have that phone system which gives you when the missiles are dropping and all sorts. And actually there were reports now saying that people in Gaza were calling on Hamas to stop. So the people of Gaza now, I'm praying that is true, and the people are saying, look, we want this to stop.
Yeah, actually, the last few days there has been multiple videos that have come out of Khan Yunis, which is in the southern Gaza Strip, and there have been hundreds of Palestinians taking to the streets and saying enough is enough. Yeah. Hamas need to stop, release the hostages, let's end this war and stuff. And we haven't really seen that before. We've seen a few brave people that, speak out and, at risk of their own life. And now we're starting to see a real kind of the people turning against that, So that is a step in the right direction. And the IDF has pretty much surrounded Khan Yunis, which is one of the remaining enclaves that Hamas control. So I think we are seeing the end of that. But of course, there are still rocket attacks against Israel. And obviously, we just had the United Kingdom, US, Canada, Australia, Finland and Italy have suspended all funding to the United Nations UN RWA agency because 12 of their staff members are alleged in a damning report to have participated in that October 7th attack.
That's frightening, isn't it? Really frightening, that if that is to be true. But the agencies the countries aren't taking any of this lightly, and they've pulled out. And I think it's sad, but that is literally the right thing to do. There was also the issue with South Africa as well, trying to say that Israel were conducting a genocide, which is ironic, especially with today being National Worldwide Memorial Holocaust Day today.
Yeah, it's very ironic and hypocritical because actually in South Africa there is pretty much a genocide going on against white farmers, and we've seen one of the main political leaders, Julius, he's been doing rallies and he's chanting "kill the Boer," and everyone's chanting that, which means kill the white farmers. They're calling them colonizers. So there have been weekly attacks on elderly farmers. Couples, they get tied up, they get killed, and so technically the South African government is allowing that. They have not done anything to stop that. So they're the last country to kind of criticize another country claiming genocide. And of course, the International Court of Justice in The Hague has just ruled that they've preliminary measures that there's not an ongoing genocide, but Israel has to obviously prevent any acts of war that may be considered genocide, and they haven't called for a ceasefire because they have basically agreed with Israel that they do need to get rid of Hamas for their own national security reasons.
Well, that's it, because, again, the irony is Hamas have specifically said that we want to get rid of all the Jews. So it's not. So it seems somewhat absurd that anyone would take that call. And again, hypocritical of South Africa to be the ones to be pointing the finger at anyone, if anything. So talk to me about some of the work that you are doing coming up.
Well, so I've been working with the Fa'aza Foundation, which was basically set up in the wake of the atrocities, and it's they've actually hit the fundraising target, £250,000 within the last month, which is incredible. So it's a fantastic organisation. They're actually bringing 100 young adults over to the UK for a very special trip, and we're also working on getting around 30 of those young people scholarships in the UK as well, which is an incredible thing. You know, for these people that have really lost family members, they've witnessed these atrocities, they've survived, you know, you have to think they need some kind of hope in their life, you know, because it must be so traumatic every day waking up and remembering what happened that day. So these young people need hope. So I'm, you know, working on that, and also working on stuff with the US election, because obviously that's very pivotal. Whatever happens in America affects the rest of the world.
Well, that is quite something, isn't it? Trump has been fined, was it 65 or 85 million, which is absurd because the limit was supposed to be 10 million. So it does look a bit odd that something, but it's unlikely he's ever going to have to pay that, really, is it?
It's very unlikely. And the reason this case was in court was because the court, E.J. and Carroll, Trump's accuser, basically said that he defamed her, destroying her reputation for basically claiming she was a liar. She didn't know what the decade when it happened. She just kept making things up and stuff. And she wasn't credible at all. So, you know, Trump called that out. And because he did that, he was taken to court in this lawsuit and now has to pay $83.3 million, which, you know, I don't know whether he will end up paying that or not, because he is challenging that ruling.
Well, we'll talk more about that in Worldview tomorrow, but let's have a chat with Rabbi Jonathan Romain. He's the director of Maidenhead Synagogue.
Right.
And Rabbi, thank you so much for joining us. I want to ask you about today and why it's so significant to the Jewish community. Obviously, most of us will know the answer, but in your view and your words.
Well, unfortunately, it is significant, partly because of history, and, 6 million people, they happen to be Jews, but it's the worst act of genocide in history ever. But also, unfortunately, other people have suffered as well. We can think of those in Rwanda, or Rohingyas, or Pol Pot, or, Darfur. Unfortunately, the list goes on. And that brave cry, which we all said in 1945, never again. Well, unfortunately, it has happened again. And also, and not just to other people, but to Jewish people, not on the same scale, of course, but anti-Semitism, has survived the 20th century and is alive and well in the 21st. And we saw it in anti-Semitic incidents throughout Europe. And in a sense, we also saw, and this was what terrified so many Jews, in the October 7th attack, because what was distinctive about the Hamas attack was it wasn't just like fighting Israeli military, which is what has happened in the past, but it was the brutality with which they attacked civilians. Disgusting things like raping women, cutting off body parts of women, smashing babies against the wall. I mean, this was not just a battle, it was sheer unadulterated hatred, and it's what comes when any one people thinks another people are less equal than them. And it's happened to us, the Jews. Unfortunately, it can happen to anybody else as well.
Are you surprised? I mean, I was absolutely astonished by the level of anti-Semitism. I, as a black woman, have never experienced that level of racism ever. So to see such high levels of anti-Semitism, which is another form pretty much of racism, are you surprised with how much has been seen around the world as well?
Yes, unfortunately, I am surprised, because you're absolutely right. Anti-Semitism is racism. So if you're against racism, which I hope most people are, then you should extend that to anti-Semitism as well. And unfortunately, it's a virus that seems to survive whatever treatment we give it. We try education, we try museums, It's genuinely puzzling why people have to hate, and also hate one particular people. I mean, most Jews, Jews are very ordinary people, and we go, I've just come out of a football match. We're just like anybody else, and yet there's this visceral hatred which just sees Jews or other people as qualitatively different, and clearly we're not.
Yeah, shocking. So today then, a very important day. What will you be doing to commemorate it?
Well, thinking quite a lot, lighting candles, saying prayers, and particularly in my case, because what I've just told you isn't just history, it's autobiography, because I'm actually a child of a survivor. My mother came over to England in August 1939, just a few weeks before war broke out, and she was one of the lucky ones, even though she was traumatized, separated from her family, came to a different country, new language. She was a lucky one because she survived. And frankly, if she hadn't got out on the Kinders transport, when Britain, as you know, allowed 10,000 Jewish children to escape from Germany and Austria, if she hadn't got out, then she would have ended up in Auschwitz or one of the other concentration camps, extermination camps, and I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't be talking to you right now. So this is very alive, not just for me, but for many, many Jews, for whom this isn't just a memory, it's a living reality, and our lives have been influenced by it, negatively, obviously, but also, hopefully, we can be a living reminder of what happens when hatred rules the world.
Well, listen, Rabbi Jonathan Romain, thank you very much for talking to us. That's Rabbi Jonathan Romain. He's the director of Maidenhead Synagogue. Joining me in the studio now, Oli London. Do you know, Oli, I, many years ago, did a play for kinder transport, and I was actually one of the children who was transported. So it was, also I visited Auschwitz and Birkenau. So have you visited Auschwitz or any of those places? Because I've got to say,
I mean, I was actually just at the Holocaust Museum in Tel Aviv, and it was very raw. I mean, they have compiled over many years a list of 5 million of the 6 million victims in that museum, and they actually have their names and where they're from. And, a person I was with, she's from London, she was visiting, she's Jewish. She actually found her grandparents' name on there, which was very, very sad. So, I think Holocaust education is very, very important because, there have been recent polls and studies that show a lot of Generation Z deny it or try to dismiss what happened in the Holocaust. And I think there is a growing movement of anti-Semitism. So, that needs to be addressed.
All right. Well, listen, Oli, thank you so much for coming in. If people want to follow you on socials, where can they find you?
I'm so very active on Twitter with politics at Oli London TV, and Instagram is London Oli.
All right, Oli, keep up the great work. Thank you so much for joining me. So that was Oli London, and also Rabbi Jonathan Romain, director of Maidenhead Synagogue.